Introduction. Well, this is just a working introduction from the rough draft. So if it stumbles around a little bit, please overlook it and forgive it. I've taken on a monumental task, bigger than most people would tackle or even consider, especially when already working 60 hours a week between two jobs. I'm writing a book about medieval English history, covering the years 1066 to 1605. Our adventure will our adventure will begin with the death of Edward the Confessor on 5 January 1066 and conclude shortly after the death of Elizabeth I on 24 March 1603. It'll end with the execution of the men involved in the gunpowder plot 2 years later. In this 5th-century romp through history, sorry, the screen keeps flickering on me, so hopefully this will work. In this 5th-century romp through history we're about to take, we'll travel to exotic faraway locations, meet interesting people, and witness them killing each other in a sickening orgy of violence fueled by avarice, aggression, or faith. You'll see the Normans obliterate the old Anglo-Saxon world, supplanting it with their own culture, a culture which I consider to be slightly superior to the old one. Yes, I know that no one people is superior to another group of people, nor have they ever been. My father's generation fought a war 80 years ago to stop that kind of thinking. I just felt it was important to point out that I have a preference for the Normans over the Anglo-Saxons, although they, the Normans, committed countless atrocities against the native population from the moment they landed in England. From time to time I will interject an opinion in this book, and when I do so I will make it quite clear that I'm giving an opinion, not presenting a fact. You'll see the hopes and dreams of Henry II slip beneath the waves with the loss of the White Ship, taking his only legitimate son to a watery grave, ushering in a period of civil war known as the Anarchy, when it was openly said that Christ and his saints slept. You'll witness a bitter feud between that same Henry and his former best mate, Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, that ended with the Archbishop's assassination, when Henry cried out, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" in a typical fit of Plantagenet rage, not knowing that someone would ever take his words quite literally. We'll watch 14-year-old Richard II bravely face down and savagely suppress the peasants' revolt in 1381, a revolt that cost many lives, including that of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Simon Sudbury. Being the Archbishop in those days was a dangerous job. We'll then see Richard swept aside almost 20 years later by the Lancastrian dynasty, which would themselves be fallen upon and defeated by the House of York in the almost constant bloodshed and violence that existed in those days. There will be numerous visits to battlefields at home and abroad, where walked men both courageous and cowardly, virtuous and vile, fights that carried thousands of souls into the next world long before it was their time. Originally, I had planned on ending this book with the death of Richard III, with the death of Richard III on 22 August 1485. In doing my research, however, I realized I could not end this story on that day and in that place. The families of York and Tudor were intertwined and interconnected in a way that could not be broken. Their story had to continue. Catherine of Valois, the widow of Henry V, married Owen Tudor in 1422. Their grandson was Henry VII, and his wife, Elizabeth of York, was the daughter of Edward IV, brother to the aforementioned Richard III. So you see, we're stuck traveling with him on this journey. The Tudors weren't here very long. They only had 2 kings, 2 queens, and 1 almost queen, not to mention multiple marriages and affairs. The Tudors also ushered in a wave of state-sponsored sectarian violence that saw thousands, Protestant and Catholic, burned at the stake, hanged and drawn and quartered. Wait a minute, that didn't come out right. Saw thousands, Catholic and Protestant, burned at the stake or hanged, drawn, and quartered. Why have I undertaken this task? Wouldn't it be easier to write about something else? Anything else? Yes, it probably would. That's not a good enough reason. In researching my family tree over the last decade, I discovered something both interesting and I think maybe just a little bit cool. I'm descended from both Harold Godwinson and William the Conqueror, from different lines, of course. I'm also descended from every king that followed them down through Edward III. The ones after him were all very distant cousins, including the current sovereign, Elizabeth II. That doesn't mean I should ever expect a birthday card from the palace. It's not going to happen. Additionally, my ancestors include most of the Magna Carta sureties. Several more ancestors were killed in either the Hundred Years' War or the Wars of the Roses. Several of them, perhaps too many, found themselves on the wrong end of an axe. Now that's gotta ruin your day. If you trace your lineage back 400 or 500 years, and yes, you can do that, you'll meet some of these same people in your family tree. But for me, this isn't just English history, it's family history. The real stories are far more interesting and more exciting than any movie or television show. We'll begin and end this journey with two watershed events in English history. The first one being the Norman Conquest, the other being the English Reformation. I would like for you to think of this journey as something akin to looking through a special kind of two-way mirror, the type you've seen in every cop show you've ever watched. One where we can see all of them up close and personal, and they'll have no idea they're under close observation and scrutiny. We'll see all of the triumphs, tragedies, joy, pain, heartbreak, and from time to time their mistakes, although they would never admit to making any of those. The Normans invaded in the autumn of 1066, and they changed everything, literally everything. Within 3 or 4 generations, England would be virtually unrecognizable. The old Anglo-Saxon world had been erased forever, existing only in the memories of the older generations. The Reformation was as destructive as the conquest. Try that one more time. The Reformation was as destructive as the conquest had been 5 centuries earlier. 1,000 years of the people's connection with Holy Mother Church would be wiped away, snuffed out like the candles on the altar after Mass. The English had always been a deeply religious, very devout people. They were thrown headlong into this chaotic maelstrom, with the national religion changing from Catholic to Protestant, back to Catholic, and finally back to Protestant. You could no longer practice the old religion that had been yours and your family's faith for at least the last 40 generations. Before it was all over, thousands of souls would be prematurely separated from the bodies that once housed them in the name of ideological purity. Guiltless people and innocent were slaughtered in wholesale lots on each side of this unnecessary firestorm, whose only crime had been believing in the wrong things, or more to the point, not believing in the correct ones. Both of these events left scars on the people and on the land that remain to this very day. Those wounds still have not had time Those wounds still have not had time to properly heal. In navigating this road that takes us from 1066 to 1605, we'll see battles, beheadings, coronations, births, deaths, weddings, funerals, revolts, famine, and plague. We'll meet kings, queens, princes, princesses, peasants, some of them revolting, bishops, barons, spies, conspirators, crusaders, and Saracens. We'll even meet an innocent peasant girl that spoke to Archangel Michael prior to her fighting the English. And by that I mean Joan of Arc. Anyway, that's the rough draft I have for the introduction thus far.